I'm Howard Dima of We Are Change, Connecticut, and this is a Truth Talk News special report. Many Catholics have probably never heard of Father John O'Connor, but he was one of the first priests to acknowledge the Kabbalistic origins of Masonic Communism and to be expelled for exposing homosexual control of the Church. Born and raised in Chicago, Father O'Connor was a military chaplain during the Second World War. He became curious about Hitler and the anti-Semitism of the Nazi regime. Many soldiers asked him why, when they liberated Jews from the concentration camps, some of the Nazi guards were themselves Jewish and had even been former mayors in towns in Germany prior to the war. Father O'Connor was ordered to be examined by a psychologist following a talk in which he named his superior as a member of the gay rights movement. His superior barred young men from joining the Dominicans if they refused to accept sodomy and homosexuality as a viable lifestyle alternative. He had been informed of this by several young males who had sought ordination. O'Connor sought the advice of Canon Lawyer Father Alfred Kunz. Father Kunz was brutally murdered in a ritualistic fashion after assisting in the investigation of a Satanic pedophile cult connected to the priesthood. On Ash Wednesday, February 28, 1990, O'Connor wrote, "When I made my vow of obedience 40 years ago, it was first and foremost to Jesus Christ, his mother, and Saint Dominic, and in obedience to them only death will silence my witnessing to the truth." O'Connor exemplifies the fate of the true Catholic today. Father John O'Connor also appealed to the Vatican for assistance in justice. He sent dossiers to no less than 10 cardinals and received not one reply. He concluded that the work of Masonic Communism had been almost complete now in the infiltration of the Catholic Church and that these cardinals were complicit in the project. Randy Engel devoted a chapter in her extremely well-documented book, The Rite of Sodomy, to the heroic and courageous preachings of Father John O'Connor. In the summer of 1991, Rome informed O'Connor that he was dismissed from the Dominicans. O'Connor packed his bags and left the River Forest Priory forever. He lived with his widowed sister until his death of natural causes on December 7th, 2006.
I'm sure there's some here this afternoon who can remember when we had gold and silver coins. And that's real money because it has a real intrinsic value. I remember when I was a youngster, even the dollar bill. I'd sometimes receive one for a birthday, and as you can imagine, as a youngster, I would examine it very carefully. I would always notice it used to say, redeemable in silver from the United States Treasury. But if you've examined a dollar bill lately, you will notice it no longer says that. Instead, it calls it a Federal Reserve note. All real money was taken from us, at least the gold, in 1932 by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And our silver was taken from us by Nixon in 1971. And in its place was issued this paper money, which has no intrinsic value. As it itself said, it's a Federal Reserve note. And a note is legal jargon for an IOU. It's really just a piece of paper. No, all real wealth has been taken from the American people and concentrated in the hands of the minions of the Antichrist. They say even our gold at Fort Knox is no longer there. It's all been assembled in deep vaults in Geneva, Switzerland. So just what is this piece of paper worth? It's not worth silver anymore. It's not worth gold. Well, it's worth whatever the Federal Reserve says it's worth. By printing more of them, of Jimmy Carter, they decreased its value. The more dollars there were, the the less each was worth. Or they can print less of them. They can constrict the money supply. They can call these in on loans. And then they can cause a depression. Mr. Alan Greenspan, who presently is the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board.
This was 1986,
he wrote an article in
ladies and gentlemen.
1958, and he said that the Federal Reserve manipulation of currency, or the money supply in the 1920s, is what brought on the stock market crash of 1929.
But they got to him, didn't they?
And Mr. Greenspan says, quote, caused the American economy to collapse. Our lives, our fortunes, and our honor today are at the mercy of the Federal Reserve Board. And I'm sure most of you think that it's just another government agency. The Federal Reserve System is no more a part of our federal government than is Federal Express, the overnight package delivery people, or the federal dry cleaners. The Federal Reserve System is a private corporation owned by private individuals. It is a secret corporation. It is so secret, it is the only corporation in America that does not have to publish the names of its principal stockholders. Every other business corporation in our country has to have on file a list of its principal stockholders that are open to public inspection. The only private corporation that doesn't have to do this is the Federal Reserve System. So we don't even know who owns it. It's the most secret, mysterious corporation in America. And it's probably owned by the international bankers.
Of course
by the
it's owned by them.
Rothschilds and the Warburgs.
Yes, it is.
And the other international bankers.
Kuhn and Loeb.
To whom we American taxpayers owe the national debt.
That's right.
You know, sometimes the press will tell us, well, don't worry about the national debt. We owe it to ourselves. Well, if we owe that national debt to ourselves, why do we have to pay $100 billion a year in interest on it?
We wish it was that
So
little
that
now, ladies and
national debt is
gentlemen.
owned by international bankers.
All this quantitative easing, dollar
And this
devaluation.
is how the Antichrist will gain control of the world.
Amen.
Now, every corporation in America is open to audit by the federal government. In 1978, a congressman introduced a law in Congress to audit the Federal Reserve. It's never been audited. But he wanted to find out what they're doing with all our money and why they've imposed this tremendous debt on the American people. By the time that law got through Congress and was passed, it said just the opposite. The Federal Reserve may not be audited. That tells you the control the Federal Reserve has over our Congress. That it can take a law introduced by a congressman and make it come through exactly opposite to what was intended. So the Federal Reserve System is part of that great deception of which St. Paul spoke in his letter to the Thessalonians. In other words, it's a central bank that controls all the other banks in our country. And did you know that a central bank is the third plank of the Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx in 1848, nearly 150 years ago? If you have never read the Communist Manifesto, I would urge you to go to a large public library and get a copy. You're in for the shock of your life. The first plank of the Communist Manifesto is a federal income tax. Karl Marx was the first one to propose a federal income tax on all wage earners in a country. The second plank is to substitute paper money for real money of gold and silver. Everything that Karl Marx laid down For the economic enslavement of a nation is already in place right here in America.
And we are enslaved. In 2012, look at what has happened.
Including women's liberation.
Look at the
The
decline
destruction of marriage and
in our
family
society
life for the sake,
and the
for the
burdens
sake
put
of
upon
so-called women's liberation. Even this
the
is
people.
spelled out by Karl Marx.
It's communism, and we have a communist
So
president,
where is
Barack
the reign
Hussein
of the
Obama,
Antichrist in the world today? Well, it's in Russia.
re-elected to bring us further
Where
into
you have the
deindustrialization and
economic
poverty.
enslavement of an entire people. It's in China, where these people are nothing but slave laborers for the Communist Party. The reign of the Antichrist is in Cambodia, where 3 million Cambodians were slaughtered by their own government. It's in Vietnam, it's in Laos, it's in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and right here in the United States. We are under the Communist Manifesto already. And this is what Daniel warned us about. He said most people would be totally unaware that they were being taken over by the Antichrist. When did our beloved America fall under the control of the Antichrist? We know the exact date. January the 23rd, 1973, when our Supreme Court enacted the death penalty against 20 million helpless babies in our country by abortion. This was a sign that we had fallen under the control of the Antichrist. Whenever the devil gets control of a nation, and I don't care where it is, he demands human sacrifice. That is the price that those who give themselves to the devil must pay. According to Solzhenitsyn, the communists have already killed 66 million of their own people in Russia, either through war, execution, or slave labor camps. That is the price that the communists paid to Lucifer and to his Antichrist. So where is the reign of the Antichrist today? Well, practically 2/3 of our planet has already been subjected to his power and authority. And as far as the rest of the world goes, it is just a matter of time. The World Bank will see to it that every other nation is brought to its knees through inflation, through a huge national debt. Everybody will be enslaved to this World Bank, whose chief executive is the Antichrist.
Uomo moderno, adulto eppure talora debole nel pensiero e nella volontà, lasciati prenda per mano dal bambino di Betlemme, non temere, fidati di lui. La forza vivificante della sua luce ti incoraggia ad impegnarti nell'edificazione di un nuovo ordine mondiale fondato su giusti rapporti etici ed economici. Il suo amore guidi i popoli e ne rischiare la comune coscienza di essere famiglia chiamata a costruire rapporti di fiducia e di vicendevole sostegno. L'umanità unita potrà affrontare i tanti e preoccupanti problemi del momento presente, dalla minaccia terroristica alle condizioni di umiliante povertà in cui vivono milioni di esseri umani, dalla proliferazione delle armi alle pandemie e al degrado ambientale che pone a rischio il futuro del pianeta.
Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern. Watch Truth Talk News Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on truthbroadcastnetwork.com.